Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Little FPX Fireside Chat. The Fireside Chat podcast. This is a lecture. You like long, boring lectures where we get into stuff? Ideas, larger concepts. Zach, your boy Zach, not my buddy Zach. Comics Matter. You paying attention? So I have a very particular set of skills. I have what you would call a bachelor's degree in anthropology with a double minor in sociology and religion, as well as I'm certificate certified by Google, as a UX designer. What does that mean? What the fuck does any of that mean? Why? You know, I have these skills and I've struggled to figure out how to apply them to life, because I know that there is some six-figure amazing job out there where I could just be happy, just doing what I love, just talking about all this stuff and making insane money. But I have not been prepared for that side of life. I have not figured out how to apply, my various skills toward what I'm doing. And I also spent 15 years aspiring to be a stand-up comedian, which looks great on a resume. As Saiyans Entertainment would say, Kyle Uniqueness, Saiyans Entertainment, one of the great YouTubers of all time. To be a comedian, you basically have to be able to do a full-time job for 10 years without having a job. Get. And I can tell you about being a comedian, the people I know that have made it, and I know a lot. I know writers on SNL, actors on SNL, people with Netflix specials, I know everyone. I know them all. My buddy brought up Theo Von the other day, and I was like, I have 7 stories about Theo Von and hanging out, which I won't get into. But to be a comedian, you have to be able to hang in the right place. It's right place, right time. And for a comedian, it's New York and LA. There's an improv scene in Chicago that can get you into the SNL factory, if that's what you're looking for. But in terms of like getting development deals, getting specials, you need to be in New York or LA. I forgot how I got here already. Yeah, I spent 15 years doing that, and let's talk about the run up to 2020. let's talk about the run up to the pandemic. So in 2017, I had a child. I made a baby, and it was the greatest, most bestest thing that ever happened in my life. It didn't happen instantaneous. The moment your child is born, they're like, "Do you want him to come sleep in the room with you?" And my wife has just gone through labor. I've just watched her go through labor, and I was like, no, let him sleep. And he's throwing up phlegm and boogers at this point. It's kind of gross, and somebody hands it to me. It's like they're handing me a dog, and I'm like, I don't know what this is. There are a lot of people that are like, the moment I saw my child, I knew that was what my life was. Everything changed. I just became so selfless in that moment. For me, for real, I became so selfless in that moment. And it's like, most of these guys are con men, lying pieces of shit. Lying to themselves, if nobody else. But for me, it didn't happen instantaneously. It happened over time as I spent time with my kid. And there are plenty of scientific studies that playing with children rewires the neural network of a male, of a man, to be more empathetic. But it did happen. There was a point where I fell in love with my child, and I realized, like, oh, this is what life is about. I wish I'd had 1 million kids. I wish every random girl I'd ever hooked up with, I wish I had 12 kids right now. I just want to get them all pregnant. That's from now on. You find me at a show, Chris Rock would always say about cheating. He's like, he was like, if you're chasing me, you're gonna catch me. I can't run that fast. If ever I were to be chased, I would get him pregnant. In the moment, I would try and get him pregnant. No, I would never. I would listen. I'm a American, and I love my wife, and monogamy, and all of Charlie Kirk's values, and Jesus. I would never. Please God, don't let the temptation ever come when I am too weak. Don't give me a burden I can't carry. Because I'll put a baby in it. I'll put a baby right in that burden. I get the whole burden pregnant. We'll have a whole family of burdens together. Ruin everybody's life. Just, it's not fair. It's not nice. You know, my wife is a wonderful, amazing human being. She's just fucking fantastic in every way you could possibly imagine. Just completely destroy that and throw it away for... But I'm gonna make a baby, because babies make me happy. Anyway. So I have a baby. And then, about 3 months after my son is born, I broke my back. Broke my spinal cord. I had a crack in my spinal cord some years before that. It had happened. I had a dog. I had a little Boston Terrier. I call him Monkey. It was a girl. Had a little dog vagina. It looked like a strawberry. Anyway, I was chasing this dog around, you know, just being a maniac, you know, just because it made the dog happy. And I jump on my bed. Now, my bed is one of these foam mattresses that... You ever see the commercials where they set a glass of wine on a foam mattress? You know, and then they jump on it and the wine doesn't spill. I jumped on one of these with my knees, and I fell and got absorbed. The shock got absorbed in such a way that I cracked one of my spinal disc cords. Cracked that motherfucker. At 25, I broke the motherfucker. Now, I went to the doctors, and they told me, like, listen, you can have surgery, but there's like a 50% chance you'll end up crippled and you'll never walk again. Or you suffer through it, you stick it through it, and maybe the technology will catch up. And I was like, I'm gonna suffer through that motherfucker. So I went through just having back pain, pinched nerves. You know, I stand in certain positions, and I would just like literally like fall over like a cartoon character. Like somebody would be looking at me, and they'd be like, I don't understand. You were filling out paperwork, and then you doubled over on the floor screaming in agonizing pain. It would happen. So about 3 months after my son is born, that crack in my spinal cord caught a nerve. Like a nerve got caught in the crack. And it was devastating. It was like I lost feeling from the waist down. Like I could pee on command, but I didn't feel like I was peeing. I went to the doctor. I just tell him this. I'm just thinking it's casual. And he's like, oh no, this is an emergency situation. You're going to the ER right now. And I was like, can I have a cigarette first? You know, I was a smoker at the time. Now I just vape. So I go to the ER, and they insist I have emergency spinal surgery because my back is broken and the nerve is caught in the crack. And there's a potential that I'll never have feeling below my waist again. So I go through this surgery. I wake up. It's the most excruciating pain I've ever had in my entire life. I wake up and I'm pounding the fucking medical bed because I'm in so much screaming, agonizing pain. Like, you know, you got the little button to hit, like a morphine drip or whatever. I'm spamming. I'm spamming the button. Please, more morphine, anything you got. I'll Tylenol, ibuprofen, crack, cocaine. I will take anything. I'm in excruciating, miserable pain. When I get out of the hospital, I have this newborn. He's 3 months old, and I can't walk. I couldn't walk for 7 months to a year. I had a walker, a literal walker, and I'm on heavy medication, like heroin, like basically medical heroin. And I get up, I would literally drink a pot of coffee to stay awake while on the meds. And my son, like, we couldn't even train him to sleep on his own as an infant because I couldn't bend over to pick him up. So he had to sleep in bed with us because if he was on the floor, I wouldn't have been able to get him. You know, you know what I'm saying? But this ends up being about 6 months where I'm off of work and I'm just bonding with my child. That's that fall in love. You know, we're just curled up next to each other, just a couple of useless humans. You can't do shit, I can't do shit, let's just love each other and take a nap. So I start to get better. You know, I was aspiring to be a comedian, and it was going fairly well. I went out to LA, I'm hanging out with Tony Hinchcliffe, who's a massive piece of shit, but I had a plan. I saw that Joe Rogan was the top of the sphere before he got his massive contract, which, let's throw in there, it's actually not that massive of a contract. He should be mad because the fucking I Sucked Off Your Neighbor podcast, or some girl, I used to be a hoe and now I'm not, the reformed hoe, the feminist icon, I sucked 7 dicks for, her podcast is called I Suck Dick in Maine, or some shit like that. Call me Tuesdays with stories. That bitch got $500 million to sign up for a TV deal. Rogan got $100 million. Now about podcasting, I knew a guy. You know, when you podcast, you have leverage. You have something that people want, and So, you have all these comedians that'll pretend to be your friend and use you for a favor, and then you also have industry guys that are looking at your numbers and seeing that you're doing things, and so they're inviting you into the things that they're doing. So I made friends with a guy that was running an app that was driven specifically toward comedy podcasts. So he had the numbers. Now, it's hard to get the numbers on podcasts because, it's like streaming numbers. It's like you have a dozen different things. It honestly isn't hard, but they make it hard. It's like, it should be easy. It should be very look-upable, just like you can look up somebody's YouTube numbers and views and likes. But they intentionally obscure it for the sake of, getting that bag and seeming bigger than they are. But he had the behind-the-scenes analytics. And so he told me, he's like, so Joe Rogan, say his podcast is at about 1 billion streams, between YouTube, podcast, whatever other, the 17, offshoot horseshit podcast things that restream it or whatever. Say he's at 1 billion, say he's at 1/7 of our population is listening to this man and his guest have an opinion. The next highest podcaster was Bill Burr. Now this is, I'm so bad with time and dates and history, but we'll say this is about 10 years ago. All right, so this is before the Rogan gets the $100 million deal. This is before the Spotify deal. It's just he's out in the wild. He's at about 1 billion. The next highest, Bill Burr, is at 500 million. It's that much of a drop-off from 1 to 2. It goes from 1 billion to 500 million, and then the next highest after Bill Burr was a massive drop-off after that. That was like Come Town and some other podcast. And these other guys, like, Nerdist and fucking Pete Holmes, they're not even in the ballpark. They're not part of the conversation. They're doing numbers. They're doing millions. But millions ain't shit to billions. You know what I'm saying? So, you're looking at this and you're like, I want to be a comedian. How do I monetize this? How do I make money? I'm very bad at the business side of this. And the entire dynamics of our entire culture have changed massively over the last 10 years. Like right now, Kia Senta, who's a YouTube streamer that does gaming, makes more money than professional NBA players, professional NFL players, platinum selling professional rappers. The professional tradecraft industry is beneath streaming. Idiot streamer kid. And there is no, to be, say a comedian or an actor or a professional athlete, there's a system that you have to go through. You have to get to A to B to C. You have to overcome these obstacles. You have to get molded to be part of the industry because you are, at the end of the day, selling ads. Your value is how much can you sell manberries or, hymns or, hair growth and dick pills and grills. How much money can you extract from dentist, from divorced dentist in their 40s, as Zach would say. And this part of the new dynamic is like the streamers are ahead of it. In fact, I want to make a prediction. If anybody wants to make a betting app, I think by the end of 2026, Drake will be retired from rap and a full-time streamer. Like, I think he's going to fully follow Joe Budden and go, he'll be on YouTube. And why not? He would be making way more motherfucking money. He'd be making so much more. All these guys that have celebrity don't realize that they're not getting that bag. They're leaving billions on the table. Like, Drake has the advertising behind him that if he parlayed that into taking advertising money as a YouTube streamer or whatever the fuck it is, he would be infinitely more valuable. Like I say, Joe Rogan should be mad that he only got 100 million. And that's a massive payday for comedians who are used to not getting those massive paydays, but they underpaid him, just like everybody who takes money from advertising. Say Lewis from the Legion of Skanks. He takes, every time he does an ad read, like, he gets like $1,000. And he'll do like 8 ad reads in the course of an episode and do 3 episodes a week. And that's a massive bag. And Lewis explained it to me. He's like, doggy. Because, I have moral scruples about taking money from people. And he's like, doggy, these guys have a budget that's set aside just for advertising. And it's like, if you don't negotiate at the highest price, if you don't just run their pockets and take their money, you're an idiot. You're a fucking moron because they are just throwing money away. And that's what the game is. The game is not a moral thing run by great people that have integrity. It's a bunch of people just trying to get their bag. And comedians in particular, their revenue stream can be sporadic at best. Now, if you're a touring comedian, there is good money in that. Even if you're just someone who is the main feature once a week, say you're just a road comic, right? At the low end, you can be making $2,000 a show, 3 shows a week, so $6,000 a week. That's buku money to a normal human. You know what I'm saying? I'm out there looking at jobs now, and I was astonished to find that the average pay rate was like below $25 an hour. I just thought everybody was making $30 an hour right now. No, there's people that are expected to get by in like 17, 15. Now you're like, what? You can't live. What, are you supposed to work 80 hours a week and just have open availability? It's absurd. There's a complete poverty class. Dynamics we don't even need to get into. Anyway, that's at the lower level. That's like if you don't have TV credits, you're not a name, you're not a draw. Once you are to those higher levels, like, I think Nick Mullen had a whole podcast where he was like, once he found out how much people that arranged his tours were taking off the top, how much they were exploiting him for his labor, just like, they would set up the show, which is fucking nothing, and then they would take 50% of the door or whatever, and he was like, that was half of it. All he had to do was make a phone call, and he could have made, double the amount of money. He could have made, hundreds of thousands instead of, 50 grand or 2,000 or whatever the fuck he was making. I'm wandering all over the place. So I had some ideas that I wanted to talk about. We're going on a trip, and we got to pack our bag. We got to pack our bag with conceptual ideas. I'm going to kind of talk about my journey through comedy and employment in the world, and where we are right now, and how I see the world, and how these different things are competing and affecting one another. One of the first things we need to talk about is Nietzsche. I'm not going to get super deep into it, right? Nietzsche, he had an idea. He said, good and evil don't exist. Now, at the time, it was like the world is, think about we're going through the religious times, the medieval times where you're killed, you're crusaded against if you're not a Christian or if you're not part of the state religion. For a long time, it was just assumed, God, good, devil, bad. These things are real. End of discussion. In fact, if you ever read Ishmael by Daniel Quinn, one of the central ideas he gets at is that humans lived on this earth for millions of years, or hundreds of thousands of years, depending on what the current archaeological record says, as hunters and gatherers. And then at some point, some group developed agriculture, which is, the growing of crops. Now, this means you're no longer nomadic. You're no longer wandering around chasing the deer, chasing whatever your food source is. You stay central. And usually this pops up around, like, coastal groups. It's called a maritime lifestyle, where it's like you could live off of fishing. Like Japanese is like a maritime. I'm get canceled for calling the Japanese a maritime. But it's like you could fish and live off of the fish respawning, so you had no need to wander around and follow the pack of buffalo or, whatever your food source was, or you didn't have to worry about all the berries drying up or, disappearing when the winter came. You had fish all the time. You had resources that would allow you to maintain your society. And the more food you have, the higher your population goes. That's in every species, from germs to lab rats to humans. Humans are not as sophisticated as we think. You have food, you eat, you fuck, you make kids. You don't have food, you fuck, the kids die, and they're not born. But food sources lead to healthy babies, which leads to population increases, particularly in species that don't have any kind of birth control. So, some group becomes the agriculture. It's called the agricultural revolution. And they're farming, and they don't just farm, they start domesticating animals, they start raising the animals that they want to eat, like domesticating cows or pigs or chickens. Those are the three main protein sources in our current Western society, and we farm them. And think about all the chickens that have to die every day for just every McDonald's to have chicken nuggets for $1 every day. And then you think there's Burger King, there's Wendy's, there's every grocery store. The amount of, there's probably billions of chickens killed a day. Just billions. Billions of chickens are born, raised, and killed every day for us to have our chicken nuggies, our tendies. At a certain point, as you begin to develop an agricultural society, now you no longer have the same roles. So in the past, you might have hunters, gatherers, caretakers. That might be, a leader that's about as sophisticated as your society is. But now you're sedentary. Now you're in one place. And the food source is coming from the farmers, which is a particular group. And those farmers are willing to give you their food, but you have to give them something in return. So now you have trade. And now you have a development of arts and crafts and agriculture and people finding other development of technology. Because people are trying to find more efficient ways to farm, and also, how can I make myself useful? Winter's coming. I want some of that fish and berry. I better make some. And then in addition to that, because you're sedentary, but your population is growing, your territory is whether you like it or not, going to be expanding. And you're going to be bumping up against other groups that are hunter-gatherers, and you're going to be faced with the choice of, like, bring them in or kill them. There was a Roman general that was like, he was taking over a society, and he was like, give them free education. And they're like, why? And he's like, because if you teach their young, within a generation, they'll be aspiring to the toga. They'll be aspiring to our ideals rather than our enemies. So it's like, co-opting a younger generation is always a better strategy than straight-up war. Well, I say it's always better, but who knows? Depends on your depends on your KPI. So this is going on for about 5,000 years, and then we start developing written language. So what happens when they go to make written language? It starts out as business transactions, and then eventually you start recording the history. Well, what is the history you're recording? It's not the history of the human species. It's the history of your culture. And your culture has, in the beginning, mythologized the idea that the earth is made for you. It's here for you to colonize, to agriculturalize, to dominate. It belongs to you to subjugate. And anybody that is opposed to that is opposed to the history of your species, the history of your kind. And they're not even thinking in these terms. This is like, there is no library. There is no internet. This is the very first written things. We're writing down, like, how did we get here? And we're like, oh, well, so we used to live in a garden and we got kicked out. And, now we have to toil for our labor. And that idea, the idea that the earth belongs to us, that is ours, that we are separate from the other species, from the species that we're domesticating. We're not hunter-gatherers that live in harmony with the plants. We're not getting our medicine knowledge from shroom trips and DMT and Mother Gaia. We're salt of the earth. Bare knuckle brawler. We're farmers, motherfucker. Pull up and say something. We run this. And so it gets mythologized into our religion, and Daniel Quinn refers to this as the Great Forgetting, where it's like history began with us forgetting that there was another way to be human. And this is a big point, because it's like, there are 80 known, like, colonies of people on Earth today, in 2025, that these are indigenous, untouched people. We're like aliens to them. They still live in the trees, fruits and berries, all that, today. But as we're writing the history of our people and our philosophy of this is ours, this is the way to be human. And so that gets internalized in this idea of, what does it mean to be human? Well, there are steps to being human. And, you start off foraging, and then you start agriculture, and then you start domesticating animals, and then you start complicated trade routes, and then you set up social systems, whether it be like kings or, monarchy, whatever your social system is, governmental rule. For a long time, thousands of years, as we're making massive developments in technology and social standing and building houses and building plumbing, the common knowledge is that the way we live is what it means to be human. And these other people, say the hunters and gatherers of the world, they're just a lower step on the evolutionary chain. They will eventually get to us or go extinct, but they're not they're not having a different story or experience. They're having the same story we are. They're just at a lower level. It might be like how we look at some of these, like, third world countries today that maybe don't have internet or something, where we go like, well, eventually they will have G5 and, Starbucks and Lululemon and all that. They just haven't got there yet. Eventually the Middle East will have, feminism and fair rights and transgender people. They just haven't got there yet. They're just stuck in a medieval mindset. But we are the way humans should live, and they will eventually catch up to us. We're just higher up the chain. So this is like one of the first puzzle pieces that I picked up, where it's like it's this poison. It's a very subtle poison. It's not even meant to be. It's not even a malicious, like, a bad guy set this up to say, fuck the world. This is how we're living. I gotta have the best KPIs. I gotta take care of these problems. I got shareholders to take care of. It wasn't even that insidious and evil. It was just development and ignorance. And what else were you gonna do? You're the first people writing shit down. You're inventing math. You can't be mad at any mistakes that were made in the past. So now we get to Nietzsche, all right? So Nietzsche was wondering, do good and evil exist? Is there such a thing as good? Is there such a thing as evil? Now, at the times, they would say, God good, devil bad, black and white, dust your hands off. Yes, it is. But he said, I don't think that's how it works. I think good might be an idea. It might be a social contract. It might be that the way we live is a social contract. That things function the way they do because we all agree to it and we all allow it to happen. But there are things that are labeled as good that are good for the people in power, but they're not necessarily good for everyone. So an example would be like exploiting people's labor. Like I said, people working for fucking 16, 15, 17, anything under $30 an hour. Fucking brokey. It's not good. You can't live off that. And especially when fucking rent is higher than a mortgage and you have student loans and every other cell phone, every other fucking bill that comes down on people. I don't know how people get by. I don't know how anyone lives. It's baffling to me that people get by. And maybe they don't, and people have all kinds of alternative incomes. So what do we call those things that are good, labeled as good, because they serve the needs of the dominant will to power, but they're exploitive of people? Those things would be considered an injustice, right? So an injustice is something where it serves a need. There's a reason we're exploiting people. It serves a need to the dominant. The dominant will needs this. So then the question becomes like, how do we deal with this? And, the ideas in the past have been like revolutions. Let's just fucking go in there, cut everybody's heads off, hang them in the town square and shove sticks up their ass. Protest, let's beg and please. Like, let's go to the guy raping us and just go, could you please just stop, raping me? It's not nice. I don't like it. Violent protests, non-violent protests, media coverage, so on and so forth. Appeals to honor and value. And one of the most interesting ideas I found to deal with this came from Huey P. Newton. So Marxism kind of shoots off of Nietzsche. So Marxism is this idea of materialism or modernity. Materialism if you're like a social scientist, modernity if you're an English major. And it's this idea that technology drives society. What was his name? Marshall McLuhan. The medium is the message. So he would say like what's on TV isn't as important as the fact that TV exists, because TV as a medium is having an effect on society. The internet, doesn't matter what's on it as much as the fact that it exists, is going to have a massive effect on the social contract, on the way people behave and interact. So Huey's idea on this was like, how do we get rid of the necessity, the need for the exploitation? How do we meet the need without having to exploit people? Is there an alternative way to do something? Right, so this idea was very appealing to me, and just some quick examples. One I go to a lot. If you're a long-time listener, you've heard this before. AOL Disk at one point were an environmental disaster. Like there was reports written that like the polar bears are gonna die, the ice cap's gonna melt, Greta Thunberg is gonna cry, like the whole world is gonna fucking end because of AOL Disk. But we kept pumping them out because we need the internet. We need it, the medium. We need the medium of the internet. The only way to get people on the internet is to send out these disks. Well, as the technology evolved, we developed Wi-Fi, we developed streaming, and now suddenly we've solved the problem. Not only do we not need AOL discs, we don't need DVDs, we don't need Blu-rays, we don't need game discs. Everything is digital. So the harmful effect of needing to hurt things was negated by innovation, right? By technology, and we got to continue the good of. Or, Huey P. Newton, he was dealing with like kids not getting breakfast, and he was fighting, now there's kids' school breakfast at school. But at the time, he would set up centers where kids could come and have breakfast before school. He negated the necessity of needing the schools to provide breakfast for the kids by providing it himself. I'm getting all excited. So, I have all all this knowledge, and I was always sort of on fire to like change the world and work with the world. And I went to the protests, and I volunteered at the homeless shelters, and I volunteered at the special needs facilities, and I went to all of the classes and all of the meetings. I'm a super liberal guy who was engaged in working with the community. And the whole time I'm kind of, the underlying idea is like, is there a formula to save the world? Is there some idea that can make things better? And that idea of negating the necessity of exploitation or evil was one of the central ideas that I came to. Now, the other person I was a big fan of was Gandhi, Mohandas K. Gandhi. And Gandhi's sort of central philosophy was the idea that all people are basically good, and that the ones that are bad are like, they're trying to have their need for love, safety, and acceptance met, but they don't know how. They have bad strategies for meeting those needs. So that's sort of the nature-nurture. You're born in nature with these needs: love, safety, acceptance, food. But how you get those needs met is a matter of nurture. That's the strategies you learn from your parents. And I used to do a comedy bit where I was like, You know, my father was an abusive piece of shit. His father before him was an alcoholic, abusive piece of shit. And his father before him was kicking the baby as it came out of the womb. Like, you know, it wasn't that long ago. It was a few generations ago where, like, everybody was just getting, like, a demented idea of how to get their needs met and how to behave. And these things have made massive strides forward in the last, literally, like, the last 15 to 20 years. And that is where our journey is heading toward. We're heading toward how things have gotten better in general. So Gandhi believed that people are basically good, and that they needed to learn new strategies and new ways to get their needs met, to grow, to work off their karma. And so Gandhi and Huey are sort of the central figures that are shaping my philosophical mind. You know, as I'm learning about how society structures, how the social agreement came together. You know, there are people that know about the history of the world, there are people that don't, and then there's like a massive media and propaganda thing that goes on where it's like it's not even intentional. Like I said, when they started writing the history of the world and they didn't know any better, well, that story continues to this day. They still refer to our planet, our species. And, you know, a lot of people talk about how, like, you know, like, what was it, Plato was, like, sentenced to death because he said the earth was round, and that, like, threatened the idea that earth was the center of the universe and that we weren't created by God to do all of this. We have extensive proof that there were other species on this planet that had culture, that had clothing, that built tools. This is the equivalent of an alien species. A genetically different species walked the earth with us at one point, and we fucking killed them all. Or they died in, you know, the ice ages and whatnot. But we have the evidence. They're there. So the idea, again, that the earth is made for us and that we're special, or that we're the only ones in the universe that have intelligence, this is a mythology, but it still gets propagated continuously to this day. So I have these skills, and I've been trying to figure out what to do with them. Now, at some point, I saw these ads for UX design. Now, you may have seen ads on YouTube that are like, I was barely getting by, and then I took this class, and 3 months later, I am working in big tech, making $300,000 a year. I'm not shitting on Mexican people. It's just the woman in the last ad I saw was Mexican. But there's a lot of these ads, and they make it seem like there's like a trade school that you can take to get a degree in some service in the tech industry. And then you get the certification. You can start. You know, they'll help you find a job. It's very hopeful and very, very positive. But the reality is that there's an invisible ceiling. There's a glass door. And the glass door is that there's a massive overhead to becoming a UX designer or many other tech jobs, but UX is what I went into. And the overhead is like, you need to have an amazing computer, and it needs to be able to run, you know, the latest version of Photoshop and several other programs. And these other programs, you don't buy the program, and you can't bootleg the program, you rent the program. You know, like you used to rent Microsoft Word, and it comes out to like $300 or $400 a month that you're paying out just to have the tools. You know, you can't buy the tools anymore. You have to rent the tools. And then it's not a steady gig where it's like, all right, you have the skills, now you go work for this company for 20 years and retire. You do it, and then it's contract work. You bid to do a thing, and then you have to, you know, pull off the job, and then you get a payday at the end. But there's a massive financial overhead. And it's like, if you're at a lower financial level where you can't afford to just throw away, you know, $600 a month for X amount of months, or $300 a month for X amount of months, you're literally not going to be capable of doing the job. Because, you know, imagine you're contracted to build a house, and then like 3 months in, they're like, you can't afford a hammer anymore. So they take all your hammers away, and you're like, guess I'll go play with Grok. Guess I'll go play with some of these free apps. And that shit really doesn't fly. Anyway, it didn't work out for me, but I want to talk about why I was attracted to it. So there's an idea central to education in the current generation. Now, this is beyond my generation. There was a lot of good ideas in my generation, but somebody picked up the ideas that Huey P. Newton was laying down. And I would probably put this mostly on Spike Lee. You might think he's not important, but he made like a PBS movie about Huey P. Newton, a Huey P. Newton story, and that propagated the idea of, you know, negate the necessity for exploitation, and that got into the head of the right person. Some you know, suburban kid who grew up listening to Tupac and watching Spike Lee joints, had his parents pay for him to go to college. And he got to, you know, get in on big tech early on. That's the story. I'm sticking to it. So in tech, there's this idea called design thinking. Design thinking is a lot like the movie Robots. Maybe it's not Spike Lee. Maybe it's the movie Robots. In Robots, one of the central ideas was see a need, fill a need, you know. So design thinking is like, how do we design our way out of problems to have more equity and accessibility for all people? So it's not just how do we innovate for maximum profit, but how do we design our way out of exploiting people? How do we design our way out of the social problems? Now, you might think this is a small idea, but I took these Google classes and it was hammered in over and every video, every lecture. This is all of big tech is design thinking. This is something I really wish Sam Hyde would take like one of these Coursera classes, because I think his mind could have just an amazing, I think he could chew through it and come up with some amazing insights going through it. Sam Hyde, you listening? Anybody out there plugged into that universe? Tell Sam Fappy, the cartoon squirrel with 16 views. Looking for you to think about some stuff. But he could get some amazing videos just out of taking the courses and responding to them. But design thinking is the thinking that is driving tech. And tech is driving, they came out of nowhere, but they've taken over everything. They're part of government, they're part of social media, they're part of entertainment. And we're living in an age where, like I said, Kia Senta is bigger than 50 Cent. You know what I'm saying? He's fucking, 23? He just sits around playing Fortnite and Elden Ring. And he doesn't necessarily have the tools, because he comes from... That is part of the problem of, the old guard had a trade craft and a gate system, which even though it was shitty, it forced you to develop a certain level of talent and expertise. But the current level, they're just fucking... It's like they're finding gold. It's the wild, wild west. They're striking oil. They're just fucking around, and they're becoming these amazing people. I think we should look forward to, at some point, there'll be something that is like, it'll be like a roast, and it'll have a streamer on it, and probably the streamer will bomb, and then there'll be some sort of tension between the streamer community and the comedy. The comedy community is already fucking cooked. Like, they're just... Bill Burr's done. He's responding to this in every wrong way you can imagine. He's defensive, he's cagey. Bill Maher performed at the Rio Comedy Festival, and then Bill Maher, who's been red-pilled, threw out a lifeline and was like, progress doesn't happen quickly, it's these incremental things. And I think he threw that out while he was talking to Louis. I'm not 100% sure, but all of the parties involved, and Bill is the one who people are the most mad at, clung to that. They couldn't think of it themselves. Bill, when he was left to his own devices, if you go watch Sane's Entertainment, he clipped up the Monday Morning Podcast where Bill Burr was like, I've been working on these roast jokes, dude. I'll give it to anybody that wants it. I was having fun, dude. I'll cut their fucking heads off. Anyway. Another example. All right, so this is a cross-section between, design thinking and eliminating the need for exploitation. So it's like a big problem when I was growing up was the education gap between public schools and private schools. And it's arguably a problem today, but... kids today don't have books. They have an iPad. And these iPads have the same learning materials in the worst neighborhood in New York as they do in the best neighborhood in Chicago. And not only have they leveled the playing field where they're all getting the same learning materials, they've innovated the learning process to, what is it called? Behavior analysis. Behavior analysis has those KPIs, man. They've innovated so it's games. I have a son. He's had an iPad since kindergarten, and it has these fun learning games on it where, he'll come home and be like, can I do some whatever app? And I'm like, yeah. And he'll sit there and do math for hours and hours. The current generation is intuitively going to be their IQ point is going to be massively higher than the last generation, just because their engagement with education is going to be higher. Now, at the same time, that's a good example. So it's we need everybody to have an education. And the education that we give people is so that they can be part of the workforce. When we give people SATs, it's not gauging intelligence as much as it's gauging your ability to fit into the current work structure, which is, at the time was industrialization and office work. And now it's evolved to also include technology and coding. But the school system exists to prepare you for the workforce. And the workforce, is ever evolving. But, there are people like myself. I'm deeply dyslexic. I would be considered to be a low intelligence person because I'm not good at math and spelling. But I just have a different intelligence. I have a creative intelligence, which is, I don't fit. I'm not a good cog for the current system that drives the world. So it would label me, there's an injustice that fucking needs to be addressed. I need a government stipend, basically, because I don't know what to do. What to do with my fucking life. I don't know. Anyway, what were we talking about? The education system, fucking going on 10 different rants here at once. How these different new ideas are always competing with old ideas, and new ideas are always going to win. That was something that Huey said, but now we're living in a time where there's just this constant cultural whiplash where we're jumping back and forth and we're going through these extreme changes because our ability to make change is vastly superior to what it was in the past. It's like modernity is like how fast we process information. So we went from modernity to liquid modernity to steam modernity, and now everybody has I have 5 AIs. I have a friend that builds AIs. I have fucking KPIs and AIs are the future. Everything is being measured in school, out of school, and we're heading toward a precipice. So they talk about like becoming a type 1 civilization. So it's like the precipice is like fascism, or overcome our problems and become, a altruistic, loving species in society. Negate the necessity for money and exploitation on all levels, which I don't think we have the infrastructure to build robots to do that. Like, we need people to make the food, build the roads. We need the labor force, but the labor force is also being financially left behind. I proposed an idea of, like, replacing people with robots, but giving that person the income of the robot until we come up with I guess they were proposing, like, a general, everybody gets a stipend or whatever. But who knows what the fuck that does to the economy, because then it's like, well, now $1 is equal to a penny. So, prices went up during the pandemic. They didn't come down. There wasn't like, oh, things got better. They were just like, yeah, now it's $20 for a bean burrito at Taco Bell. Anyway, I don't know I don't think I was ever going anywhere with all this. I just want to talk about it. I've just been thinking about it a lot, and these are ideas I want to sit down and talk to people about. There's one company out there that, here's something for you to think about, and maybe this will cause a massive change in the world. The M&M company, the Snickers company, they use real chocolate. Not for all of their products, but for some of them. Now, their chocolate comes from kids in Africa, child labor. And this was exposed in a news report, and it was a big to-do. And the parent company, Mars Wrigley, was like, hey, we're gonna lead the world in stopping this. We're gonna end this, right? And then the pandemic hit. And they did nothing because it went away. They stopped thinking about it because it went away. So they continued using their child labor. And the news company that broke the story, when it kind of went viral, they followed up. And they had a little girl who had been, picking chocolate or whatever since she was 4. And her family was intimidated into recanting their story. It's so sad. And I wouldn't say that came directly from, the M&M. The yellow M&M didn't go down there and, like, break her knuckles and threaten to kill her mom or anything. But, it was probably the company that they contract to give them the chocolate. There's always layers and layers and layers of bureaucracy and deniability to everything that happens. But here's a thing to watch, right? Mr.beast. Mr.beast is also in the chocolate industry. And Mr.beast, in every video, says he uses conflict-free chocolate. His videos get millions of views, 3 or 4 videos a week, and he's on prime time, and he has a cartoon, and they're building like a Disneyland around him. So, like I said, the kids of today are much smarter than the kids of the future will be. Mr.beast is an example of there's this message, there's this time bomb, there's this trap he's setting where he is telling these smart kids again and again and again, conflict-free, conflict-free. Design thinking. We've designed a way around this. We don't need to exploit these people. We don't need to hurt these people. And the yellow M&M and the red M&M, they're just doing what they're doing, just getting their profits. But eventually, that story's going to break again. And, Mr.beast hasn't come out with them, but he has laid the groundwork for their entire company to just be financially decimated and destroyed for exploitation. Unless they, pull the nose up. And I'm sure they'll just do we have now reconsidered. We were thinking about how to be the world's leading people of not exploiting children. And we decided, that idea we had, and then it went away, so we didn't do anything about it. Well, we've decided to do something about it. Anyway. I just wanted to kind of talk about the world and ideas and how I see the world. And, yeah. Guys, watch my video game shows. It's great. I hang out with Aggro and Wheezy and Helly Belly, Heller to Keller, and Kaz. And go shout out to Focus CDS. Got a new show. I think it's called Comedy Jokes and Bars. He's reacting to stuff. Shout out to Focus CDS. Go subscribe to his new channel. And I'm Little Fappy X. Pretty soon the AI will be good enough that I'll be able to make the next season of my show. And it's going to be amazing if we get there. I don't know if we'll get there, but it'll be amazing if we get there. All right, y'all. Fat. Deuces.
Major news: Hershey, Nestle, and at least 5 other cacao companies have won a court case allegedly involving child labor and child slavery. So 8 former child workers from Mali have basically tried to sue these big companies, claiming that they were trafficked into the Ivory Coast and forced to work on cacao farms under brutal conditions. And you can see here they're saying that they were threatened with starvation if they did not work.
But majority of the cocoa in the world comes from West Africa, and 46% of labor on cocoa farms in West Africa is child labor. And so, yeah, it's pretty brutal. So
now that we see a story like this, what should we do with this information?
Well, I think what we need to do is pressurize these cocoa companies who signed a declaration more than 20 years ago to eradicate child labor to actually do it. This is a fixable problem. We don't often go to places where we feel that, but this is. Use that money, build schools, get these kids an education.
Why does it matter? Poverty forces families to rely on child labor. Farmers earn less than $1 per day, far below the living wage needed to afford adult workers or education. Mars, Nestle, Hershey, Ferrero, Mondelez, Lindt, and Barry Callebaut dominate the industry and the controversy. Recent investigations reveal a 2023 CBS News expose found children as young as 5 harvesting cocoa for Mars suppliers.
Listen, guys, if you happen to be a younger listener and you have an earnest desire to save the world, if that's on your heart, Jesus was like, you got to find that formula. Here's your reading list. Here's a massive college education in just a few books. Read Ishmael by Daniel Quinn, and then Revolutionary Suicide by Huey P. Newton. And then if they give you line paper, Ride Up by Daniel Quinn. And then Making the Impossible Possible by Bill Strickland. Strickland, like Strickland Propane. King of the Hill. Yeah, man. And then go research design thinking and figure out how to fix this. It's there. The medium is the message. The medium is important. The medium needs to be served. But how do we meet the medium without exploiting the people? You know, it's illegal to be homeless, which means you need ID. You need ID to rent, so now everybody has to have ID, you know. We're looking for internet ID. Everybody has to be identified on the internet, and it's not just going to be to log into shit. It's going to be your private Discord messages, your Instagram messages, whatever system exists at the time. It's going to get sent to your boss. They're going to see the crazy wild. You're not going to be allowed to think. It's going to limit your thinking. That's 1984. Don't let it happen. You know what I'm saying? The medium is important. How do we make it without the exploitation of freedom or freedom of speech? These are big questions. Figure it out.